This is Corporal James Whitlock of the British Royal Signal Corps, speaking from Forward Observation Post Able 9. Today is the 25th of October, 1915. 1 year, 2 months, and 27 days since Europe plunged headlong into a war that we all believed would be over by Christmas last year. But it didn't end, and it didn't fade away quietly. Instead, it grew steadily worse, grinding up lives and burying men in muddy trenches across an endless Western front. And now, as I sit here speaking into this wireless set, the situation has spiraled into something I cannot fully comprehend. Something beyond nightmares, beyond reason. I transmit this message, without certainty, that anyone will hear it. It's possible that I'm talking to myself, speaking into the ether like a madman. But if by some small miracle anyone out there is still alive and able to listen, I urge you, pay close attention. It may save your life. It may help you understand what's happening out here, because right now, nothing makes sense. Yesterday morning began like any other cold autumn dawn in Belgium. Gray skies heavy with rain clouds, the distant rumble of artillery shells pounding enemy lines. My detachment, the 6th Signals, was assigned to maintain communications between frontline units near Ypres and British headquarters back in Poperinghe. It was routine, tedious work, handling Morse signals and dispatches, patching frayed lines broken by shellfire. But by late afternoon, everything changed. It was precisely 5:32 in the evening, as recorded in my log, when a brilliant flash erupted over the horizon towards Lille. It was not artillery. It was not lightning. It was something else entirely. Brighter than sunlight, harsher than any illumination I had ever witnessed. For several seconds, the entire world turned white. Men around me shouted in pain and fear, covering their eyes. The ground beneath my feet shuddered violently, hurling me backward into the mud. When the blinding glare finally faded, silence enveloped everything. A horrifying, unnatural silence. The constant roar of battle was simply gone, leaving behind only the sound of frightened breathing and muted, sobbing from the men who had survived. As we struggled to regain our bearings, a gust of wind blew across the trenches, carrying with it a strange, bitter scent, metallic and sharp, burning my nostrils and throat. The air itself tasted foul, poisoned in a way I couldn't place. We had no idea at first what had happened. Was it a new form of German artillery? A gigantic bomb dropped from one of their Zeppelin airships? None of us could fathom an explanation. As I helped Captain Ashworth back to his feet, I saw that blood trickled from his ears. He did not seem aware of it. Others around me looked dazed, wandering aimlessly or sitting on the ground, staring blankly into space. Some men, closer to the blast, had collapsed immediately. Others were already dead, lying motionless at the bottom of the trench, with their faces frozen in expressions of shock and confusion. In the chaos that followed, I discovered our wired communications were completely severed. Every telegraph line we relied on had been cut or burned away, isolating us from command entirely. Captain Ashworth ordered me to activate the Marconi wireless set we'd been given just a month earlier, a new, experimental device intended for emergencies. With trembling fingers, I powered it up, desperately trying to raise command in Poperinghe or anyone else listening. But every frequency was silent except one, the German channels. And what I heard from those transmissions made my blood run cold. Enemy radio operators spoke openly, with a disturbing calmness, about their devastating new weapon, a device they referred to only as Garrett Veer, or Device 4. They bragged of entire cities vanishing, of armies annihilated in mere seconds. They claimed Paris had fallen overnight, consumed by a single blast that left nothing behind but smoldering ruins. Similar attacks were reported from Arras, Amiens, and Bruges. They described with chilling detachment how entire battalions ceased to exist, vaporized without warning. My hands shook as I listened, knowing full well what I had witnessed was exactly what they described. Whatever this great veer was, it was a weapon unlike anything the world had known before. Something monstrous, hidden by German scientists and unleashed without mercy. Through snippets of intercepted chatter, I pieced together more terrifying details. Enemy agents had secretly infiltrated critical positions across France, Belgium, and Britain, sabotaging defenses, poisoning water supplies, and planting explosives along key communication routes weeks before yesterday's assault. They spoke openly about traitors embedded within our highest ranks, facilitating Germany's brutal victory. It explained why our intelligence never warned us, why our leaders seemed blindsided, and why, ultimately, resistance had collapsed so quickly. We were betrayed long before the first explosion ever lit the sky. Now, alone and isolated at Able 9, I'm forced to face the grim truth that Allied command may no longer exist. My comrades here are dead or dying, killed by the mysterious sickness that spreads rapidly from contact with ash and dust that settled after the blast. Even I am not immune. Already I feel a burning itch spreading along my arms and chest, a rawness in my throat that won't fade. Breathing grows increasingly painful, and fatigue washes over me like a heavy wave. Something terrible lingers in the air, a poison that none of us understand yet. I am terrified to imagine how much longer I have left. But I refuse to give up. For as long as I have strength left in my body, I will broadcast these messages, hoping to reach anyone still out there. If you are within hearing distance, take shelter immediately. Avoid the blast areas. Drink no water touched by ash. Trust no official channels, for they may already be compromised. Move cautiously at night, evade detection, and survive any way you can. If you receive this transmission, acknowledge with your location and status. Any response at all would be a glimmer of hope in this endless darkness. Until then, I remain at my post, transmitting hourly updates for as long as my equipment and my health allow. This is Corporal James Whitlock, resuming transmission from Observation Post Able 9, near Ypres, Belgium. It's now 1000 hours, October 26th. I repeat, if you're receiving this message, identify your position immediately. So far, all channels remain silent. Last night, I scarcely slept, plagued by feverish dreams and the relentless throbbing in my temples. Around midnight, through the choking darkness, distant flashes lit the eastern horizon. I'm convinced now those were additional detonations of the German Gerät Wehr weapon, although smaller, perhaps tactical variants. The enemy seems to be systematically clearing pockets of resistance. Each explosion is followed by a glow that lingers, unnaturally for hours, illuminating clouds from beneath, like silent lightning frozen in time. Whatever is happening out there defies comprehension. Shortly after dawn, I managed to crawl above ground to survey my surroundings more clearly. The landscape was almost unrecognizable. Trees splintered and burned, fields churned and blackened, littered with debris and bodies in all directions. A fine layer of gray ash blankets everything, carried by a stiff northern wind. I tore a strip from my undershirt to cover my nose and mouth, though it offered scant protection against the acrid taste that hangs perpetually in the air. Each breath hurts. My skin continues to burn beneath the uniform. My eyes water constantly, and exhaustion weighs heavily upon every movement. The symptoms grow worse by the hour. On my brief exploration, I found the trench line running west had been completely obliterated, collapsed inward by the force of the initial explosion. Digging through rubble and twisted barbed wire, I uncovered the remnants of an abandoned French position. Rifles lay scattered and useless, barrels warped, ammunition blackened by fire. Amid the wreckage, I stumbled upon a tattered map marked with red circles around Lille, Amiens, and Arras, each labeled cryptically, Zone Interdict, Forbidden Zone. Whoever prepared it had clearly been aware of something before the attack, and some intelligence our commanders either lacked or ignored. Or worse, perhaps it never reached them at all. Further searching led me to a small bunker, half buried beneath earth and debris. Inside, amid shattered lanterns and overturned tables, I discovered a damaged French field telephone. In desperation, I tried repairing its wiring to establish any form of contact. For a moment, hope flickered as the receiver crackled to life. Yet, all I heard was static, punctuated occasionally by distorted snippets of voices, speaking French and German interchangeably, as though somehow twisted together by the chaos engulfing us all. Then abruptly, the line went dead once more, leaving me isolated yet again. Returning to my own bunker, I checked my supplies. Rations are scarce. 2 tins of corned beef, a handful of hard biscuits, and less than half a canteen of stale water remain. I know that drinking from nearby pools is suicide. The water here is contaminated with whatever fell from the sky after the explosions. My throat feels raw, swollen, and every swallow is agony. But rationing my remaining water is my only chance at survival for another day or two. Beyond that, the future grows uncertain. The German broadcasts continue with chilling regularity, filled with cold triumph. They no longer use code words, as if secrecy no longer matters. According to their claims, Brussels surrendered early this morning, and Antwerp is fully occupied. German infantry and armored divisions are apparently advancing unopposed towards the French coast, establishing new forward positions all along the Channel ports. They speak confidently about the final defeat of Great Britain, announcing repeatedly that the British Empire itself will soon become irrelevant. The broadcasts speak of our navy destroyed, sunk in its harbors by covert sabotage and mysterious explosions, echoing what I heard yesterday. I pray these reports are exaggerated, but dread gnaws at my stomach with every confident pronouncement they make. Earlier today, around 0900 hours, I heard distant engines approaching from above. Peering through the cracks in my bunker roof, I glimpsed 2 enormous German Zeppelin airships slowly drifting overhead, their massive hulls painted in dark gray, marked clearly with black iron crosses. They moved methodically across the battlefield, maintaining low altitude, seemingly unaffected by the turmoil below. From each gondola beneath the rigid frames, I could see men leaning out, scanning the wreckage below with field glasses. Reconnaissance, undoubtedly, but for what purpose, I could not guess. They flew south toward what was once Ypres, silent observers of the devastation their country had unleashed. Around noon, I monitored a weak transmission on an Allied frequency. For a brief moment, my heart soared. The faint voice identified itself as Lieutenant Maurice Beaumont, French 28th Infantry, broadcasting from a basement in Cambrai. He spoke of total devastation, massive civilian casualties, and entire divisions wiped out instantaneously. Beaumont described French troops fighting desperately alongside British forces near Saint-Quentin, overwhelmed by German armored units of unprecedented strength. He begged for reinforcements or air support, clearly unaware that no help was forthcoming. His transmission ended abruptly, replaced by static. After repeated attempts, I could not raise him again. I fear he too is now silenced. Every hour deepens my understanding of the catastrophe that now engulfs Europe. The German victory has shattered conventional warfare, shifting instantly from trenches and rifles into a brutal new age of annihilation, weaponized through science and ruthless calculation. We entered this war thinking it would be short, decisive, heroic even. Instead, we find ourselves crushed beneath machines and weapons we never dreamt possible. I am haunted by the images I have seen, the endless ash-covered landscape, men staggering blindly, skin blistered, coughing violently until they collapse. This poison consumes everything it touches. And yet the Germans march forward, unharmed, seemingly immune. How? I remain committed to this post, transmitting these observations as clearly as I am able, hoping someone out there can hear, learn, and prepare. If you are receiving this, I implore you to heed my warnings. Do not approach the blast zones. Trust no unknown water sources. Shelter underground if possible, and avoid traveling during daylight. The Germans patrol relentlessly from the air, and soon I fear they will sweep through on foot, capturing or destroying any survivors they find. I have barricaded the entrance to my shelter, piling debris and shattered furniture against it. My rifle rests beside me, though ammunition is scarce and unlikely to hold off any serious assault. My primary weapon now is this wireless set, my voice carrying these messages into the uncertain silence. Perhaps no one is listening. Perhaps Britain, France, and Belgium are truly gone, swallowed by the darkness of this new, terrifying warfare. But until the batteries fail or the poison overtakes me, I will keep broadcasting these transmissions. It is my duty. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, broadcasting again from Observation Post Able 9, Ypres Sector. Today is October 27th. My situation continues to deteriorate rapidly. Each transmission drains more strength from my body, yet the urge to keep speaking, to keep warning others, overrides all exhaustion. Still, no responses have reached me. If anyone out there can hear this message, I desperately ask you to reply. Provide your location, status, and any intelligence you possess. I cannot express clearly enough how urgently we need to share information in these dark days. During the night, temperatures plummeted, and the muddy landscape around me froze solid, crackling beneath my boots when I ventured out before dawn. The unnatural chill seemed somehow intensified by whatever toxins still linger in the air. I spent most of yesterday evening attempting to strengthen my position. I dragged additional timber and sandbags from the nearby collapsed trenches, reinforcing the makeshift barricade at the bunker entrance. Each movement was a struggle. My limbs felt heavier with every exertion, and my lungs burned fiercely. Breathing has become torturous, my chest constricted as if caught in a vice. Whatever sickness has afflicted me since the first detonation is worsening. Yet, surrendering to despair is simply not an option. Around 0400 hours this morning, faint sounds stirred me awake, drifting through the silent landscape. They were not the usual distant artillery impacts or machine gun fire. Instead, they were slow, rhythmic, unmistakable, marching boots crunching frozen ground, punctuated by muffled voices issuing commands in German. With cautious movements, I climbed partially from my bunker to witness an alarming sight. Several columns of enemy infantry steadily advancing along the shattered roads, approaching from the direction of Menin, eastward towards Passchendaele Ridge. Unlike any soldiers I've seen before, these German troops were entirely covered in peculiar suits made from thick, waxed canvas or rubberized cloth, each wearing large, cumbersome masks connected to bulky metal canisters worn on their backs. Their appearance was ghastly, insect-like, their footsteps methodical and tireless. I froze in place, hardly daring to breathe, watching their procession pass within a few hundred yards of my hiding spot. It was clear to me then that the enemy was fully prepared for the horror they unleashed. Those protective suits and masks were no coincidence. The Germans had known exactly what their weapon would do, precisely what poisons it would spread, and had shielded their own men accordingly. We, on the other hand, remained entirely unprepared, helpless before weapons that defy every convention of warfare. My suspicion about traitors infiltrating our ranks now feels like undeniable truth. They sabotaged our intelligence and readiness deliberately, ensuring we never stood a chance. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray, I ventured briefly onto higher ground, concealed by the remains of a shattered farmhouse wall, surveying the horizon with binoculars. To my dismay, I spotted more Zeppelin airships cruising leisurely above, drifting west toward Poperinge. From their gondolas, enemy observers methodically scanned the ground, occasionally dropping bright red signal flares, presumably marking positions for their infantry or directing artillery strikes. A sense of hopeless dread crept over me. Against such overwhelming aerial reconnaissance, our chances of evasion diminish rapidly. If they discover my location, my bunker will become my tomb. Around mid-morning, an unexpected transmission crackled through my wireless. A voice faintly broke through the static, speaking English. identifying itself as Sergeant William Hargrove of the Canadian Expeditionary Force, broadcasting from a location southwest of Arras. His signal was fragmented and distorted, but, from what little I understood, Hargrove described widespread devastation and chaos. Entire divisions of British, Canadian, and French troops had vanished after repeated detonations. He confirmed similar horrors at Amiens and Abbeville. Entire towns turned into scorched ruins. Survivors left to wander through a toxic landscape. He mentioned strange illnesses spreading among his men, skin blistering, coughing fits that produced blood. His final words chilled me deeply. Germany's new weapon is unlike anything humanity has faced. Do not come near these places. They are poison. Abruptly, his voice was replaced again by static, leaving me shaken and desperate for answers that continue to elude us. My health is steadily declining. Rashes and blisters cover most of my arms and torso, weeping fluid that stings horribly. I wrap torn pieces of clothing around the worst areas, but it does little to ease my discomfort. My vision occasionally blurs, and dizziness nearly overtook me several times today. Yet, even in my weakened condition, I must press forward. If these transmissions reach anyone, they may spare other lives from suffering a similar fate. Let this record of the unfolding disaster serve as a warning and a plea for caution. The enemy has changed warfare forever, and survival now demands extreme vigilance. The German radio broadcasts I intercepted earlier have grown increasingly ominous. They boast of their rapid advances into France, of British naval defenses utterly destroyed through sabotage and surprise bombardments from submarines operating off the southern coast. They claim troops have already landed on British soil near Dover and Ramsgate, securing beachheads to invade deeper into Kent and Sussex. I desperately hope this is propaganda designed to demoralize any remaining resistance, but the confidence of their words suggests terrifying truths. If Britain itself falls, we will have nowhere left to run. This new German weapon, whatever horrific science they've harnessed, appears unstoppable. Late this afternoon, I caught a fleeting transmission on a Belgian civilian frequency. A woman's voice, distressed and trembling, broadcast from a basement in Bruges. She described the city as completely occupied, German soldiers patrolling every street. She spoke of families hiding underground, terrified and starving. She pleaded desperately for help, knowing none was coming. Her voice cracked repeatedly as she described neighbors succumbing to illness, children unable to stop coughing, a creeping dread overtaking them. The transmission ended abruptly, cut off mid-sentence, replaced only by empty silence. My heart aches knowing the fate awaiting innocent civilians caught in this nightmare. I grow weaker by the hour, but I refuse to abandon my duty. If these transmissions provide even a sliver of valuable information, they remain my highest priority. Please heed my warnings. Avoid contaminated areas, remain underground whenever possible, and above all, trust no water or food exposed to open air. We must adapt immediately, or perish. Any resistance against this new form of warfare requires caution, intelligence, and above all, unity. If you are still alive out there, know this: you are not alone. We will survive only by working together. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, broadcasting from Forward Observation Post Able 9, Ypres sector. Today is October 28th. It has been over a year since the war began, and it feels as if I have been here for decades. The days blend together, cold, wet, and heavy, with the smell of decay. I woke up this morning with blood on my lips, and on the rag I use as a mask. My throat feels shredded, every breath raw and painful. I know I am getting weaker, but I cannot stop now. If anyone is hearing this, if you are alive and listening, you need to understand the full scope of what is happening across Europe. The night passed without sleep. The sounds around me have grown stranger, more unnerving. There is no artillery now, no rifle fire. Instead, I hear the wind dragging through broken trees and abandoned farmhouses, carrying a low hum that comes from nowhere and everywhere. Perhaps it is the airships, perhaps the faint hum of their engines, echoing from somewhere far above. I climbed briefly to the surface at dawn, and through the fog, I saw more Zeppelins drifting westward. One was so low that I could see the shape of the men leaning out from its gondola. They were scanning the ground with handheld lamps, sweeping the light slowly back and forth across the landscape as if hunting for survivors. I retreated into the bunker and waited, certain they would see me, but they passed without slowing. My body is deteriorating. The burns on my arms and chest have worsened. The skin sloughs away in patches when I change the wrappings. I am lightheaded constantly now, and the fever leaves me shaking with cold one moment and drenched in sweat the next. I remember how Captain Ashworth used to say that if a soldier couldn't fight, he should at least pass along information. That is what I cling to now. This wireless is the only weapon I have left. If I can share what I've learned, maybe someone, somewhere, can do better than we did. Yesterday evening, just before midnight, I intercepted a German transmission that has kept me awake ever since. It was an unguarded conversation between two enemy officers, one in Lille and the other near Arras. They were laughing about how easily they had taken France, boasting that the entire British expeditionary force was annihilated in less than 3 days. Then they spoke of London. They said London was next. They were waiting for a clear window, waiting for favorable weather. One officer joked that the capital would burn so bright it would be visible from Hamburg. I tried to convince myself it was empty propaganda, but the confidence in their voices left no doubt. If they truly intend to strike London, then God help everyone still there. I have begun piecing together the pattern of their attacks based on intercepted messages. Each use of the German device leaves a permanent dead zone, a circle of desolation where nothing survives. These zones seem to be spreading outward from key railway hubs and industrial centers, ensuring that any survivors are cut off from supply and communication. It is a systematic eradication. They are not simply defeating armies. They are erasing entire regions. I believe the map I found in the French bunker 2 days ago marked the first of these dead zones. Lille, Amiens, Arras, all gone now, and the zones continue to expand. Earlier this morning, I ventured westward toward what used to be the main road to Poperinghe, hoping to find other survivors or abandoned supplies. The road is gone, a jagged scar of craters and wreckage. Along the way, I found the remains of a British field hospital. The tents had been flattened, their canvas burned black. A few medical stretchers still stood upright, but there were no living patients. The dead lay scattered in the open, some covered in sheets, others untouched. Flies swarmed thick over everything, but I could not bring myself to move closer. My strength was waning, and I knew lingering too long would kill me. I took what I could, a few tins of biscuits, some water from a sealed jug, and returned to the bunker before nightfall. I also saw something that unsettled me more than the wreckage. Along the horizon to the south, I noticed a pale glow. It was the same unnatural light I saw when the first device detonated near Lille, but this one did not fade. It hovered there for hours, dim but steady, like a constant fire smoldering on the edge of the world. The glow stretched wide, far too wide for any ordinary fire. I do not know whether it is some lingering effect of the weapon, or if the Germans have moved on to a new phase of their assault, but the sight of it chilled me to the bone. Later in the day, I managed to pick up another faint Allied signal, this time from someone identifying himself as Lieutenant Marcus Elwood, British Army, broadcasting from Dunkirk. His voice was frantic and filled with despair. He claimed German forces had already reached the outskirts of the town, and that their advance was unstoppable. He described seeing the weapon detonate in Calais just the day before, obliterating the harbor and everything within miles. Elwood said Dunkirk would be next, and he was preparing to destroy his equipment before retreating inland with a handful of survivors. I tried to respond, but his signal was lost before I could even say my name. To anyone listening now, I want you to understand this. You cannot fight the Germans conventionally. Their weapons are beyond anything we have. We used to think that bravery and numbers could win battles, that the courage of soldiers would tip the scales, but I have seen entire divisions vanish in the blink of an eye. You must survive differently now. Avoid population centers, move quietly and at night, and seek shelter deep underground where the poison cannot reach. Do not linger near dead zones. The sickness there will kill you as surely as any bullet. As I speak, I feel the air growing colder and my breath shorter. I do not know how much longer I can continue. The batteries for the wireless are almost depleted, and my body is failing. But I promise that until I can no longer speak, I will remain here, sending out these messages. Perhaps someone will hear them. Perhaps someone will survive because of them. If you are in Britain and you hear this, I beg you to prepare. Do not trust the official reassurances. If the Germans intend to use this weapon on London, you must act now. Leave the cities. Take your families and go inland. Find shelter far from rail lines and ports, and carry as much food and clean water as you can. This may be your only chance. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, broadcasting once again from Forward Observation Post Able 9, Ypres Sector. The date is October 29th. I am weaker than I was yesterday, and the fever is worse. My voice may not carry as far, but I will continue as long as I am able. The cold seeped into the bunker last night like a living thing, creeping into my bones. I awoke, shaking uncontrollably. My uniform soaked through with sweat, and it took nearly an hour before I could gather the strength to sit up and test the wireless set. I feared the batteries had given out completely, but to my relief, the generator still gave a faint, steady hum. That small comfort was enough to force me to continue. The silence outside is even more unnerving now than the distant thunder of artillery used to be. At least gunfire meant others were alive, fighting somewhere. Now, there is nothing, only wind and the sound of my own breath. I ventured outside again this morning before first light, desperate for any sign of survivors. The world above remains an unrecognizable wasteland. The earth is cracked and charred, trees stripped bare or reduced to skeletal remains. Ash clings to everything like snow that will never melt, coating the ruins of farmhouses, equipment, and the bodies that lie in the open. I kept my improvised mask tied tightly around my face, though it does little to filter the bitter air. Every breath makes my chest ache. I tried to drink a little water, but it burned my throat and came back up minutes later. My rations are nearly gone. Around 0600 hours, while I was scavenging the remains of a collapsed British supply wagon near the road, I heard distant gunfire from the direction of Poperinghe. It was short-lived, a brief exchange of rifle shots, then silence. It might have been a small group of survivors fighting German patrols, or perhaps civilians defending themselves. I considered following the sound, but I know I lack the strength to make it more than a mile or two. If I collapse out in the open, I will not get back here. At approximately 0900 hours, I intercepted a clear German broadcast. They were speaking to their command in Hamburg, reporting on what they called Phase Drei, Phase 3. The officer on the line confirmed that their forces had secured the French Channel ports and that the British mainland was now within reach. He spoke of targeting the heart and waiting for optimal weather conditions before striking. My stomach turned when I heard him mention London by name. The tone in his voice was not speculative. It was confident, as if the destruction of the city was already guaranteed. I listened for nearly 20 minutes as he described the device's transport to the French coast under heavy guard. He referred again to Great Veer, the same weapon that leveled Lille, Amiens, and Calais, but he also mentioned a Großere Vorrichtung, a larger apparatus, which he said was being prepared for the British capital. I can only assume this is an even more powerful variant. If that is true, the scale of destruction could eclipse everything we have seen so far. Not long after, I heard a voice in English over a weak Allied frequency. It was a young man, his accent unmistakably from the north of England. He identified himself as Private Edwin Cartwright, broadcasting from a farmhouse cellar somewhere near Saint-Omer. His message was panicked, broken by sobs. He said his unit had been annihilated 2 days prior, and that he was alone with 2 wounded men who were dying slowly from the sickness caused by the ash. He begged for instructions, for someone to tell him where to go. I tried to respond, to guide him west, toward Dunkirk, or inland, toward any surviving French positions, but his signal faded completely before I could finish. I sat there with my hand pressed to the receiver for a long time afterward, listening to the static, hoping he would return. He never did. I have seen no other signs of life in the last 24 hours. Even the animals have vanished. Not a single bird calls from the shattered trees, and no horses or livestock remain in the villages I have searched. The silence gnaws at me. I find myself speaking aloud sometimes just to hear another voice, though it only reminds me how alone I am. My body continues to betray me. The burns on my arms and torso have deepened into open sores, and my strength fades faster with each passing hour. Still, I force myself to move, to check my surroundings, to keep this equipment operational. If I stop, I will not start again. At midday, I risked traveling south along the ruined main road. I wanted to confirm the source of the pale glow I reported yesterday. I only made it about 2 miles before I collapsed against a burned-out wagon, exhausted. The glow was still there, faint but constant, just beyond the horizon. It does not flicker like fire, nor does it diminish. I am certain now that it is not natural. I fear it may be a permanent scar, left by the device, perhaps even the device itself, still burning unseen. I dared not get closer. While resting, I heard another distant explosion, this one muffled and far away, likely somewhere to the north. It was not the same as the earlier detonations, not as bright or as all-consuming, but it was enough to send a plume of ash into the sky. I could see the Zeppelin airships moving in formation toward that area minutes later, their shapes barely visible through the haze. They hunt tirelessly, seeking out anyone left alive. It is only a matter of time before they sweep this sector completely. If anyone is receiving this message in Britain, please listen carefully. The Germans have crossed the channel in small detachments, and their airships and submarines are operating freely. Do not assume the Royal Navy will save you. I have heard repeated enemy broadcasts claiming that our fleet was struck in Portsmouth and Scapa Flow before it could mobilize. Whether or not this is fully true, I cannot say. But every shred of information I gather points to Britain being far more vulnerable than anyone realizes. If you are in London or any major city, you must leave now. Go inland, away from rail hubs and factories. Find shelter underground. Do not wait for orders from command. They may never come. This may be my last coherent transmission. My breathing is labored, and my vision blurs as I write this log between broadcasts. I feel as if I am fading, piece by piece, yet I will remain at this post until I can no longer lift my head. If you are out there, if you can hear my voice, know that you are not alone. We may be scattered, broken, and dying, but we are not gone. There is still hope for those who act quickly and with caution. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, broadcasting from Forward Observation Post Able 9, Ypres Sector. It is October 30th. If you have been following my transmissions, you will know that my situation has worsened considerably. I am growing weaker by the day, and each time I key this wireless, I am unsure whether I will have the strength to finish. But I will keep speaking for as long as I can, because silence will help no one. The temperature dropped again last night. I wrapped myself in every piece of cloth I could find, even covering my hands and head, but the cold felt different this time. It was not simply weather. The chill felt unnatural, like it was radiating from the earth itself. I spent most of the night listening to faint creaks and groans outside the bunker, convinced that German patrols were moving through the area. Just after 0200 hours, I heard what sounded like a wagon being dragged slowly along the main road. I dared not rise from my shelter, but through a narrow slit in the rubble, I glimpsed lantern light bobbing in the distance. The shadows of men moved past, silent, except for the crunch of their boots and the creak of the wagon wheels. They were gone within minutes. This morning I climbed to the surface carefully, checking that the patrol had not returned. What I found chilled me further. The tracks on the road were fresh and deliberate, leading toward Popperinge, but I could also see where several sets of boots had turned off the road and fanned out through the fields. They are sweeping the countryside methodically, closing in on any holdouts. I know that eventually they will reach this bunker. When that happens, I have no illusions about my fate. Around 0900 hours, I intercepted one of the clearest German transmissions I have ever heard. They were speaking from a command station on the French coast, likely Boulogne, and they confirmed that Garot Veer, the weapon, had already been moved into its launch position. They said only that the weather window opens tomorrow, and that all units must be in place before then. The officer spoke with certainty that London would be struck within 48 hours. Hearing that, I nearly dropped the receiver. I knew it was coming, but hearing the confirmation was something else entirely. I felt an ache in my chest that was not just from illness. I thought of the families still in the city, people who have no idea what is about to happen. I tried immediately to raise any British station, any authority at all, that might be able to act on the information, but there was nothing. My signal only echoed back with static. I tried switching to civilian frequencies, broadcasting warnings in plain English, but again, I received no reply. Either no one is listening, or those who might have heard are already gone. Later, around noon, I managed to pick up a faint, but unmistakably British voice. It was a woman this time, speaking from somewhere inside London. She identified herself as Clara Hughes, a nurse working at St. Thomas's Hospital. Her voice trembled as she described the panic sweeping the city. She said rumors of the German weapon had begun to spread, and that government officials were urging everyone to remain calm, promising that the capital was secure. But she did not believe it. She said the hospitals were already overwhelmed, not with wounded soldiers, but with civilians who had fled the coast, many of them coughing and feverish from exposure to ash. She begged for information, for any proof that the warnings were real. I told her everything I could, repeating the German transmission I had just heard about the planned strike. There was silence on the other end for several seconds, and then she thanked me in a small, quiet voice. She said she would try to leave the city before nightfall. Then her signal faded, and I have not heard from her again. The burns on my arms and chest have worsened. The sores are deep and raw now, and I have no bandages left to cover them. I used the last of my clean water this afternoon to clean the wounds, though it made little difference. My strength is failing faster each day. Several times this evening I collapsed to my knees, simply trying to move the barricade from the entrance of the bunker. I have considered abandoning the post, trying to reach Dunkirk, or even crossing into France to find survivors, but I know it would be suicide. My body would not carry me more than a few miles, and so I remain here, speaking into the void. As the day wore on, I began to hear the distant sound of engines from the coast. They were deep, throbbing sounds, different from the high whine of zeppelins. These were heavy machines, perhaps trains or convoys moving the device into its final position. Around 1600 hours, the noise grew louder, accompanied by a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. I could not see anything from the surface, only the gray haze that now perpetually clings to the horizon, but I know they are preparing for something catastrophic. At one point, I intercepted another Allied voice, though it was faint and broken by static. It was a British officer, Captain Horace Mallory, speaking from somewhere in Kent. He said that German patrols had been sighted along the coast and that several villages had been evacuated inland, but that many civilians refused to leave. He begged for confirmation about the weapon. He said he could not convince anyone to act without proof. I told him everything I knew, that the strike on London was imminent, but I could tell from his tone that he was unconvinced. His final words were, "If what you say is true, God help us all." Then the line went dead. I cannot explain the despair I feel knowing that so many people may still be in the city when the weapon detonates. If you are hearing this and you are in London, you must leave now. Do not wait for orders. Do not believe reassurances that the city is safe. Find a way out by any means necessary. Travel on foot if you must, but go inland, away from the rail lines and factories. Seek shelter underground, if you can find it. Take food and clean water. Do not stop until you are far from the city. I can hear movement outside the bunker again as I speak. At first it was only the wind pushing through the debris, but now I am certain I hear footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, drawing closer. I have the rifle beside me, though there are only 4 rounds left. If they discover me, I will have no chance against a full patrol, but I will not be taken alive. If this is the last time you hear my voice, know that I have done what I could. I have passed on every detail I have gathered. Perhaps it will help someone, somewhere, survive. I only ask that, if you do survive, you do not forget what happened here. Do not forget the men who died believing they were fighting for a future. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, still broadcasting from Forward Observation Post Able 9, Ypres Sector. The date is October 31st. If you are receiving this, please respond. My batteries are fading, and I fear I will not be able to transmit much longer. I survived the night, though I am not sure how. The footsteps I heard outside the bunker yesterday evening drew closer, then moved away again. I held the rifle ready for hours, sweating through my fever and straining to hear over the wind. At one point, I was certain someone brushed against the barricade, but they did not attempt to force it open. Perhaps they assumed the place was empty, or perhaps they planned to return. I did not sleep at all. My body trembled with cold and pain, and I could only clutch the receiver and hope I would live long enough to continue these broadcasts. This morning I forced myself above ground for what I suspect may be the last time. The world outside is worse than ever. The pale glow to the south has grown brighter, a constant, unnatural light that makes the landscape appear as if frozen in dawn even at night. It seems to radiate from a single point, perhaps Boulogne or Calais, though I cannot be certain from this distance. I am convinced now that this glow is connected to the weapon. The Germans are preparing something immense, something far worse than what they unleashed at Lille and Amiens. As I surveyed the horizon, I saw the airships again, drifting silently above the dead countryside. At least 6 of them in formation, their gray hulls marked with iron crosses, scanning the ground with powerful searchlights. They are not simply searching for survivors now. They are directing movements, coordinating something much larger. A group of infantry passed along the road to the west shortly after, fully masked and suited as before. I ducked beneath the ruins of a wall and waited, barely daring to breathe. They did not see me, but they are close. Too close. Shortly after 0900 hours, I intercepted a German transmission. It was brief, but unmistakable. They confirmed that Geratveer, the weapon, was ready. The officer on the line stated clearly that the British capital will be erased by nightfall. His words chilled me to the core. There was no question, no hesitation. It was an order delivered with complete certainty. They spoke of the end of resistance and a demonstration to the world. My hands shook as I copied every word into my logbook. I knew then that time was almost gone. In desperation, I began broadcasting warnings on every frequency I could reach. I repeated what I had learned about the planned strike, naming London explicitly. For the first time in days, I received an answer. It was a man's voice, heavy and exhausted, identifying himself as Inspector Harold Beckwith of the Metropolitan Police, broadcasting from a hidden station in South London. His words were filled with disbelief. He said that officials in Whitehall had dismissed all reports of the German weapon as hysteria and that they were still urging civilians to remain in their homes. He told me the city was already overcrowded, with refugees from Kent and Sussex, thousands of people with nowhere to go. He begged me for proof of the attack. I told him everything, every intercepted message, every observation. There was silence for a long moment, and then he said quietly, "I'll try to get my family out." His voice cracked when he said it. Then the line cut out. I kept calling, hoping he would return, but instead I heard another familiar voice. It was the nurse, Clara Hughes, the one from St. Thomas's Hospital who had spoken to me yesterday. She was breathless, panicked, saying she was trapped at a railway station with hundreds of others. She said trains had stopped running because the lines ahead had been destroyed, and that soldiers were trying to control the crowds. People were screaming, fighting to get onto any train that remained. She said she could already see the glow in the southern sky, and that it was growing brighter. Then I heard shouting in the background, and the sound of glass breaking. She must have dropped the transmitter, because the next thing I heard was static. I tried calling her name over and over, but there was no answer. The hours dragged on. I rationed the last of my water, forcing small sips into my parched throat. My body feels like it is shutting down. The burns on my arms have spread. My fingertips are swollen and numb, and my vision swims when I stand. Yet I know I must continue, because the world outside is about to change forever, and someone must bear witness. At approximately 1700 hours, the first signs of the strike began. I felt it before I saw it, a vibration in the ground, subtle at first, then growing until the walls of the bunker rattled. The air grew strangely still, and even the wind seemed to vanish. Then the sky to the south erupted into a white light, unlike anything I had seen before. It spread upward and outward, swallowing the horizon. I covered my eyes, but the brilliance burned through my lids. Even from this distance, I felt the heat against my face. I do not know how long it lasted. Seconds, perhaps minutes. When it finally faded, the glow on the horizon was replaced by a rising cloud, black at the base and tinged orange and red at the edges, towering higher and higher. My stomach turned as I realized I was watching the destruction of London. I could not move. I could only grip the receiver and speak, hoping someone, anyone, was listening. I described what I saw as calmly as I could, though my voice was shaking. I told them the city was gone, that the heart of Britain had been erased. The German broadcasts began immediately afterward. They declared that resistance was finished, that the British Empire no longer existed. Their voices carried a cold triumph that made my hands clench in rage. They spoke of new targets, of moving beyond Britain entirely, and of how Great Veer had demonstrated its power to the world. I sat there in the bunker listening, my throat too tight to speak. I thought of the people I had spoken to in London, of Clara Hughes and Inspector Beckwith, and I knew they were almost certainly dead. Now it is dark outside, though the glow on the southern horizon still lights the clouds. I do not know what will come next. The Germans will continue sweeping the countryside, and they will find me eventually. My batteries are nearly depleted, and my body is close behind. But I will not stop transmitting until I can no longer lift the receiver. Someone must know what happened here. Someone must remember. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, broadcasting from what remains of Observation Post Able 9, Ypres sector. It is November honest, and if you are receiving this, you should know that London is gone. I barely survived the night after the weapon detonated on the southern horizon. Even from this distance, the heat and the pressure from that blast reached me, rolling over the countryside like an invisible tidal wave. The earth trembled beneath me, and I thought for a moment that the walls of the bunker would collapse entirely. When it was over, an eerie stillness followed. The pale glow in the sky had vanished, replaced by a churning cloud that loomed like a mountain above the southern horizon. Even now, more than a day later, the cloud remains, drifting slowly east. It stretches farther than I can see, blotting out the sun and casting everything in a perpetual dim twilight. I went above ground briefly this morning, wrapped in what remained of my cloak and mask. and the devastation is worse than I could have imagined. The ash falls constantly now, thick and black, clinging to my uniform and stinging my skin wherever it touches. My boots left prints in it like snow. I stood on the ridge and stared south, though I could not see London from here. I did not need to. The horizon tells the story clearly enough. There is nothing left. The German broadcasts last night were merciless. They spoke in measured, triumphant voices, declaring that Britain had been neutralized and that all surviving forces must surrender immediately. They even gave instructions on how to approach their lines safely, promising food and medical aid to those who complied. It was a cruel lie, but I know that some desperate people will believe it. They boasted that the Royal Navy no longer existed, that our government had been obliterated, and that all resistance on the continent would now collapse. I can only hope those statements were exaggerations, but after what I witnessed, I cannot convince myself they are. The silence on Allied frequencies has grown heavier with each passing hour. I have tried again and again to raise anyone, headquarters, outposts, even civilians, but I hear nothing but static. Yesterday I managed to catch a faint signal from what I think was somewhere near Glasgow. The voice was faint, a Scottish accent, though I could barely make out the words. They were asking for confirmation that London had been struck. I told them what I knew, and there was silence on the line for nearly a minute before they replied. The voice simply said, "Then it's over." And then it was gone. My supplies are nearly gone. I have not eaten since yesterday morning, and the last of my clean water was finished hours ago. I tried collecting rainwater, but what falls from the sky now is black and bitter, and I cannot bring myself to drink it. My burns worsen each day, the blisters breaking and bleeding through my sleeves. Fever clouds my thoughts, and when I move, my legs feel as though they belong to someone else. I know I cannot stay in this bunker much longer. The Germans will find me. Just after dawn, I heard the footsteps again. This time, there was no mistaking them. A German patrol moved directly over the roof of the bunker, their boots grinding ash and broken timber. I held my breath as I crouched in the corner, clutching the rifle with trembling hands. I heard muffled voices and the sound of a shovel striking earth, as if they were probing the ground for hidden survivors. They remained for at least 20 minutes before moving away, and I knew that next time they might not pass me by. I have decided that I must leave Able 9. This wireless set has been my lifeline, but the batteries will not last much longer, and staying here will only mean dying alone when the patrols return. I will take what little I can carry and move west, toward what remains of Poperinghe. I do not know if the town still stands, or if anyone remains alive there, but it is the only option left. Perhaps I will find others, or perhaps I will find a safer place from which to continue broadcasting. Before I leave, I want to share something I intercepted last night. It was a German transmission, heavily coded, but I could make out certain words. They spoke of Phase 4 and of finalizing Europe. They mentioned neutral countries by name: Spain, Switzerland, even the United States. It seems the Germans believe their victory is complete, and now they are turning their attention outward. I do not know what this means for the rest of the world, but it terrifies me. I also caught a brief, heartbreaking civilian message from somewhere in the south of England. A man was speaking in a hushed, shaking voice, saying he and his family were hiding in a cellar near Brighton. He said the air outside burned their throats, and that his children could no longer stop coughing. He asked anyone listening to tell him what to do. I tried to answer, but the signal cut off before I could finish. It haunts me to think of them trapped there, waiting for a rescue that will never come. The ash is falling thicker now, and the air tastes of metal and rot. I can hear the distant thrum of engines to the south, perhaps more German airships or perhaps machines connected to the weapon. I do not know. I do know that if I remain here another night, the patrols will find me, and I will be taken or killed. So, I will end this transmission soon and begin the journey west. I do not know if I will survive it, but I cannot remain here waiting for death to come to me. If you are listening, know that you are not alone. Even if I do not make it, there are others like you scattered across what remains of Europe, holding on however they can. Do not surrender. Do not allow the enemy to convince you that resistance is hopeless. Move quietly, trust no one you do not know, and find shelter deep underground if you can. Take nothing from the blast zones, not even food or water. It will kill you. I will attempt to continue transmitting from wherever I end up, though I cannot promise when or how far the signal will reach. If you hear my voice again, I will give the new location as soon as I can. Until then, stay hidden, stay alive, and remember what has been lost, so that it may never be forgotten. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps, broadcasting once again. It is November 20. I am no longer at Observation Post Able 9. I abandoned it at first light yesterday, and am now transmitting from what I believe is an abandoned customs office on the outskirts of Poperinge. I carried the wireless set as far as I could before my strength failed me, then scavenged parts from a destroyed lorry to cobble together a power source. It is barely functional, but it is all I have. Leaving the bunker was the hardest decision I have ever made. That small, damp hole in the earth had become a prison, but at least it was a familiar one. I knew it could not last, not with German patrols sweeping closer each night, but walking away still felt like severing my last tether to survival. My burns throbbed with every movement, and the fever left me stumbling through the ash like a drunk. I kept low to the ground, moving only when the wind blew hard enough to cover my footsteps. The landscape I walked through was unrecognizable. Ash covered everything, falling so thick that my boots left deep impressions behind me. Entire fields were charred and lifeless. Fences collapsed, and what trees remained stood as blackened skeletons. The smell was overwhelming, a mix of burnt timber, rust, and something far worse that I cannot bring myself to describe. I avoided the roads as best I could, keeping to the fields and drainage ditches, but there were places where the devastation was so total, there was no cover at all. Crossing those open stretches left me exposed and terrified, certain that a German Zeppelin would appear at any moment. At one point, I stumbled across a farmhouse that had been abandoned in haste. There were signs of a struggle, a table overturned, a teacup shattered on the floor, a child's coat still hanging by the door, but no bodies. I searched every room quickly, hoping to find food or water, but there was almost nothing left. I did find one sealed jar of pickled onions and a bottle of what I think was rainwater collected before the blast. It was warm and stale, but I drank it anyway. It stayed down, and for that I am grateful. The closer I came to Poperinge, the worse the signs of German presence became. I saw fresh boot prints in the ash, wagon tracks cutting through the countryside, and, more than once, I heard voices carried on the wind. Once, just before dusk, I was forced to crawl into a ditch and lie motionless for nearly an hour as a column of German soldiers passed along the road above me. They wore the same heavy suits and masks I had seen before, and they marched without speaking, their rifles slung across their backs. I was close enough to hear the hiss of the filters on their masks. I did not move until they were long gone. When I finally reached Poperinge, I hardly recognized it. The town has been reduced to ruins. Many of the buildings have collapsed entirely, and the rest are scorched and gutted by fire. The marketplace where I once saw Belgian farmers selling produce is now a crater, and the church steeple has been sheared in half, the bell lying cracked and silent in the square. I moved cautiously through the streets, afraid of both German patrols and what I might find. There were bodies here, dozens of them, some buried under rubble, others lying in the open where they fell. I tried not to look at their faces. I found this customs office by accident while searching for shelter. Its windows are shattered, and the roof leaks, but it has a back room that can be secured with a heavy door. I barricaded it with desks and chairs, then set up the wireless using the office's old telegraph battery. It took me hours to make it work. My hands shook so badly I dropped the connectors multiple times, and the fever left me collapsing on the floor more than once. but eventually, the faint hum returned. I cannot be sure how far this signal carries anymore, but I will keep transmitting until it fails. Since setting up here, I have intercepted several transmissions, most of them German. They speak now of Phase 4 openly, and it seems they have begun targeting what remains of the neutral nations in Europe. I heard a message about a device detonating near Geneva, though I cannot confirm it. Another spoke of troop movements toward the Spanish border. If this is true, then no country is safe. Germany intends not just to win this war, but to erase any opposition completely. I also heard a faint civilian broadcast last night, though it was so weak I could barely understand it. It came from somewhere in Wales, I think, a man and a woman speaking alternately into the microphone. They said they were sheltering in an abandoned railway tunnel with a group of 30 others, mostly children. They begged for news, asking if there was anywhere safe left. I told them to stay where they were, deep underground, and to ration their supplies carefully. I do not know if they heard me. The line went silent after a few minutes, and I have not been able to raise them again. As I sit here speaking, I can hear movement outside the building. It could be animals, though I have seen none in days, or it could be a German patrol. I am too weak to fight. My body aches constantly, and my burns have become infected. The smell of them fills the room. I know I do not have much time left, but I will not stop speaking. These words may be all that remain of what we once were. If you are hearing this, and you are anywhere near Britain, you must understand that the weapon is unlike anything humanity has faced before. You cannot fight it. You cannot hide from it if it finds you. The only chance you have is to stay far away from any place the Germans might consider valuable. Do not linger near cities, ports, or railway lines. Stay underground if possible, and do not drink any water or eat any food exposed to the ash. I do not know what I will do when the Germans inevitably find this building. I can barely walk now, and I doubt I could make it far. But I will continue transmitting for as long as I can. If nothing else, let these words be a record. Let someone, somewhere, know that we fought, that we lived, and that we tried to survive, even as the world was burned away around us. This is Corporal James Whitlock, Royal Signals Corps. And I fear this will be my final transmission. I am still in the ruined customs office on the outskirts of Poperinghe. My body is failing me, and the battery is down to a faint trickle of power. Each time I key the transmitter, the signal cuts out for seconds at a time, and I have to thump the housing to bring it back. But I will speak for as long as I can. If someone is hearing this, please, remember my words. The fever is worse now. My burns are raw and infected, and I can barely lift my left arm. I am too weak to stand for long, so I have pushed the transmitter against a broken chair and am leaning into it. Every few minutes, I hear sounds outside the barricade. Boots on the ash, wagon wheels creaking along the road, and once the unmistakable hum of a Zeppelin passing low overhead, I know the Germans are close. Perhaps they are searching for stragglers like me. Perhaps they are sweeping the town before moving west. Either way, it is only a matter of time before they find me. This morning, just after dawn, I managed to climb to the roof of the building. The effort nearly killed me, but I wanted to see the world one last time. From that vantage, the scale of the destruction was laid bare. Poperinghe is a dead place. The marketplace where farmers once gathered is a crater filled with stagnant water. The church steeple that once stood proud above the rooftops is now a shattered stump, leaning precariously over the square. Beyond the town, I could see fields stripped bare and villages reduced to blackened ruins. The horizon glowed a sickly orange beneath the towering cloud that still hangs over the south, a grim reminder of what became of London. While I was on the roof, I saw movement to the east. A German patrol, maybe a dozen men, advancing in a line through the fields. They wore the same heavy suits and masks, their rifles slung across their backs, and they moved with mechanical precision. I lay flat on the tiles and watched them until they passed out of sight. When I finally crawled back down, my arms and legs were shaking so badly I thought I might collapse right there. I know they will search these buildings eventually. I have barricaded the door as best I can, but if they decide to breach it, there is nothing I can do. I have intercepted several German transmissions in the last 24 hours. They are growing bolder with their language now, speaking openly about their plans. They have begun moving eastward, toward what remains of Russia, and south into Spain. One transmission mentioned neutralizing American interests before winter. I do not know what that means, but if it is anything like what they have done here, then the world is facing a darkness I cannot comprehend. I did manage to pick up one faint civilian voice late last night, a man somewhere in northern England. He said he and a group of survivors had found shelter in the ruins of a coal mine near Newcastle. He asked if London was truly gone. I told him yes, and there was silence for a long time before he said quietly, "Then we'll stay underground. We won't come out." I wanted to tell him he was doing the right thing, that staying hidden was the only way to survive now, but the line cut out before I could say the words. I have not heard another Allied transmission in days. It is possible that I am the last voice still broadcasting. If that is true, then let this be the record. We were not defeated by courage or numbers, but by betrayal and a weapon we did not understand. The Germans infiltrated our governments, sabotaged our defenses, and then unleashed something so devastating that we never had a chance. Entire cities were erased in seconds. Armies ceased to exist. Civilians fled only to be consumed by sickness and ash. We never stood a chance. To anyone hearing me now, you must learn from this. Do not concentrate in large numbers. Do not linger near any place the enemy might find strategically useful. Travel at night, avoid main roads, and hide deep underground whenever possible. Do not trust enemy broadcasts, promising safety or aid. They are traps. If you find other survivors, help each other, but be careful who you trust. We lost Europe because we trusted the wrong people. My hands are shaking too badly to write now, so I will speak plainly. I do not know how much longer I have left. I have no food, no clean water, and no way out of this building. If the Germans breach the barricade, I will not surrender. I have one bullet left in the rifle, and I will use it rather than be taken. As I say these words, I can hear them outside again. Boots on the ash, the creak of leather straps and wagons, and the low murmur of voices in German. They are closer this time. Perhaps they can already hear me through the walls. Perhaps they are deciding whether it is worth breaching the door. I do not know. If you can hear this, please understand that we did not die quietly. Even now, as the world collapses, there are those who refuse to give in. There is still resistance, even if it is only a handful of scattered voices in the dark. Remember that. Remember that we lived, and that we fought for as long as we could.